Our next speaker is Donna Smith-Fee, and she is a realtor at 5 Market Realty here in town, and has just been a great supporter of Met Talks, and is just somebody that I hope that I get to know better over the coming year, because she totally seems like my people, and I love her enthusiasm and just the vibe that she puts out. And she's here to tell us about how not to get screwed in real estate. And I'm super excited to hear what she has to say. So without any further ado, let's welcome Donna to the stage to give us her mediocre best.
How's everybody doing? Okay. I have 50 snack boxes of Doritos in here. So, this is set up. I know we got a small group tonight, but this is set up for you. This is based on, I didn't really prepare material other than a few lovely slides, but questions, this is all about, I'm facilitating this. This is less about presenting and more about facilitation. So any questions that you have, any, just whatever it is you need. So my name is Donna. My business partner, Christina, is here. And she has a whole set of skills as well. So if I don't know the answer, Christina will know it. If we don't know it together, I will find somebody who does. Alan Kennedy is here. Alan, will you wave your hand? He's a lender from Bank South. So if you have, I was an English major and I don't do math over 6 times 5. So Alan can help me out with numbers, lending questions that you might have. If you don't want to ask me directly, ask us in between the break, whatever it is that you need. But this is for you. So, how not to get screwed in real estate is just about being smart and being educated and knowing what you're getting into, because it's a big thing. So the average cost of a home in Athens is about $187,000. So do y'all know what an amortization schedule is? By the time you pay the bank part of that, it's a lot of money is what I'm trying to say. So you want to be smart going in, and buying a home is still one of the easiest ways, believe it or not, to build wealth in this country. So it is still doable, and Athens and this surrounding area, it's completely doable. So if you can't buy a house now, if it's a goal of yours, you can buy one in the future. So I'm going to throw out a bag of Doritos to somebody who's going to ask me a question. Okay, this picture obviously is: do you need an agent? The answer is no. You can buy real estate without an agent, but you can also cut your own hair, but how many people really want to do that? When I was in college, you ever read that Cosmopolitan article where you take your bangs and you twist them and you cut them like that? It's supposed to feather them? Yeah, the same. It doesn't feather them, does it? No. And so I had to wear a baseball hat for 6 months to wait for that to grow back out. So an agent helps you because they're knowledgeable. They know what they're doing. So when you're going in a transaction that could cost you about $250,000, you need the person who has the information and has access to knowledge. So you can go online and look at Zillow and Realtor.com and all those other things, but having an agent, the agent is there to support you. So for some of you, having an agent may be the first time you've had an employee, because we're there for you. So telling us what you want and what you need and what your goals are, that helps us do our job, again, for you. So having an agent protects you in the long run. So some people think going in it without an agent can save you money. And it may feel like you can, but the risk of going into a transaction of that scope without an agent could cost you more money in the long run. So in the short term, you might think that you're saving, but in the big picture, you might not, because there's just so much information out there. A full-time agent is doing this every day, all the time. Typically, people buy houses once every 7 years. So it's just not enough knowledge. If you're going out on your own, it's just not enough knowledge. So, who wants, yes? Oh, the lights are in my eyes. Braden, the lights are in my eyes. There's no weight to the Doritos. Okay, go ahead.
Dorito mayhem. Can you clarify real quick? So usually what people think of is if I want to sell a house, I get a real estate agent. So what you're saying is if you want to buy a house, find your own real estate agent to communicate with the real estate agent of the people that sell the house?
Yes, and here's why. It's kind of like a board game where you have the seller has the house, and the seller has hired the listing agent. So who is the listing agent loyal to? The seller, exactly. So if you have a buyer's agent, who is the buyer's agent loyal to? The buyer, exactly. And so unless you're super, super good at negotiations, and some of us are, some of aren't, you want to be able to have those agents go to work for you, because sometimes it can get a little, negotiations can get a little acrimonious. You're going into somebody's house and you're judging their house based on its value, based on its condition, and all of those things. So if you're talking to the seller directly, it is hard to get out of that without insulting the seller, quite frankly, because it's their house. They think it's pretty great, right? They probably think it's worth more money than it actually is, and that's what the buyer's agent is for. The buyer's agent is to represent you, and the seller's agent is to represent the seller, and you can only have one boss. So if you call the listing agent directly, that listing agent might tell you, yeah, I can take care of you, I can work both sides, but who is that selling agent, who's the listing agent responsible to? They have a contract, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. They have a contract. The listing agent has a contract with the seller, so they are bound by that. It's kind of like a marriage. They have to be with each other. That's what they do. So I want to drink coffee naked with my deck. So think about this sentence for a second. What kind of house is this person looking for? A house with a deck, that's right. Some privacy, probably not a subdivision if they want to be naked on the deck. And that was an actual request that I had. So if you decide to go with an agent, there are, last count, 947 agents in the Athens area. I know. When I got started 10 years ago, there were only 450. So we've doubled our count. The recession, caused a lot of people to drop out, but now that the market's really strong and everything's great, a lot of people are jumping in. So when you're deciding to pick an agent, it's okay to interview agents. It's okay to tell your cousin, I don't want to work with you. It's okay. So everybody has a real estate license, but picking your agent, you got to be able to tell them things like, hey, I want to drink coffee naked on my deck. You got to tell them what you want. So it's got to be somebody that you trust and somebody that you're comfortable with. If you don't trust them and you're not comfortable with, if somebody gives you a bad haircut, are you going to go to them again? Of course not. So once you're with an agent, you don't have to stay with them if they're not providing you the service that you want. You just don't have to. There is a local firm in town that is charging buyers $300. So do not do that. I know, that's insane. There are 900 agents. I'll give you $300 just to be my client. You don't pay them. We should be working with you. So there's something called a buyer's brokerage, and it's an agreement where you're basically agreeing to hire me as a buyer's agent. It's a contract that you sign. It allows you to represent that person. But before you sign that, you don't pay the buyer's agent any money. Before you sign that, you just need to read it, like understand what it is that you're getting into, but you're hiring that agent as your employee, as your representative to go with you through a transaction. Okay, this is Alan's slide. Alan kind of looks like that just a little bit. This is about the lending process. The lending process is not fun. Alan, close your ears just for a second. It's not fun because they're going to be all up in your business with your finances. You got to send them 2 years of tax returns. You got to send them, is it 3 or 6 months of bank statements? 6 months, how many? Oh, 2 months? 2 months of bank statements. So everything that you spend that goes through your checking account, your lender is going to see it. So all that weird stuff you spend your money on, they're going to see it. So your lender is a lot like your real estate agent. You need to be with somebody who trusts you. When you're shopping for a lender, it can be very tempting to go online and look at the big banks, the Rocket, whatever those people are called, et cetera. But something is going to go wrong with the process. It just does because it's complicated. So I highly recommend you go with a face, a real person whose office you can drive by and say, I don't understand this. What does this mean? That kind of thing. So work with people. You're going to build your own team. So find the agent that you're comfortable with, that you can tell things to, like, I need a room that has super strong beam supports because I want to hang some stuff from my bedroom ceiling, if you know what I mean. You need an agent who can talk to you. See? Some of you have one. Which ones have one? I'll give you some Doritos if you tell me. It's a whole freaking box of Doritos. All right. But it's deductible because it was for this. So you work with people. So the other thing about the lending, I had a client one time, about a week before you close, they're going to go back through your finances to make sure you haven't left your job, that things haven't changed. So I had a girl, she's relatively young, and she called me. She goes, I'm at Lowe's. I'm about to buy a dishwasher. And I panicked because they were kind of pretty close on their loan to debt ratio, that kind of thing. And then I made her leave Lowe's because you can't buy anything. While you're in that process, you just have to be very careful with your money and with your finances. So going to Target and spending $300, you need certain reserves in place, but your lender will walk you through all that. They'll walk you through the process about what kind of reserves you need, how close you are. Some people have plenty of room. Well, they could go buy a car or a washer, dryer, or whatever you need. Some of us don't. Some of us are kind of on a tight threshold there, so you want to be careful. Let your lender take you through that. They will tell you. It's another big, big reason why you've got to work with people that you trust. Okay, agreements and contracts. These are, once you're into a contract, you cannot get out of it unless you play by the rules. So once you find a house that you like, there's something called the purchase and sale. And there's something in there called the due diligence period. This usually runs about 2 weeks. It depends on what you negotiate, but that is your time to discover everything you want to know about the house. You do your drive-bys, all the research that you need. This is your time to do it. Because you can call me during due diligence and say, I'm really upset still about the Braves leaving downtown. I don't want to buy the house anymore. It doesn't matter. You can get out of jail free during that time frame. But once that due diligence period is over, it is a binding contract. You cannot get out of it without penalty. You can be sued, you can lose your earnest money. There are things that you need to do. So when you're in those agreements, you can't just walk away from them. It's not like a cell phone contract or something. They're legal documents. So as you go through the process, and this is why you need an agent, why an agent would be good for you. You have your purchase and sale contract, and that's where all the negotiations have taken place. And then there are amendments, depending on your situation, what kind of deal has been structured. There are amendments and other contracts, other agreements that go with that. For example, if a house has been built prior to '78, it is federally mandated that you have a lead-based paint agreement. You have to have that in there. So, and that's why, again, your agent will know that. So, this is, if I leave you with nothing else, this is the most important thing. Question everything. Read the documents. With a lot of my clients, before we even go down that road of putting in an offer, I will send them a blank contract because it's a lot easier to read a contract when your name and your money is not attached to it. So you find a house, you love it, you negotiate the money, and the next thing you know, I'm sending you an 8-page contract, most of which is legalese about why you can't sue me and why you can do this, all that kind of stuff. If you read that beforehand and discuss with your agent what it means, then you get that part out of the way. You get the education part out of the way. And when you find the house that you love and you're able to negotiate the price that you like, you've already learned about the contract. So in my mind, it takes a lot of pressure off. And if we can take the pressure off you, buying a house is supposed to be fun. You're about to buy a house. It's really cool. You're going to raise your family in that house. You're going to have parties in that house. You're going to play board games till midnight in that house. So you want that part to be fun. So read it and question every single thing. This is why you need to be able to have a good relationship with your agent, because every document, you need to read it and question your agent about it. Make sure they know all the answers too. All right, somebody from the group wanted to know about ghosts and dead people. Do y'all recognize that hallway? I heard somebody grunt in the back. I can't see. It's from The Shining. So anyway, if somebody dies in a house, I don't have to disclose that to you, believe it or not. But if you ask me about it, I do have to disclose it. So I do have clients. I have one in particular. I sold her house a couple of years ago. At least once a month, she sends me a house that she wants to go see because she's convinced that it's haunted. So we will still, don't tell all the other agents, but we still go see houses just because she thinks it may be haunted. So she likes the idea of a ghost. If somebody's, I already mentioned that, if somebody's died in the house, we do have to disclose, we have to tell you if you ask us, but it's not on what's called a seller's disclosure. So, and if there's a ghost in the house, I can't prove it, but if you feel it, is it worth more money or less money? Depends on whether or not you're into ghost or not. So, inspections. This is kind of a big deal. Remember we mentioned due diligence? During the due diligence time frame, that's when you get your house inspected. The inspector, however, can only inspect what they can see. So sometimes I think we expect a lot of our inspectors, they can't see through walls, they can't see the pipes underground, all of that. But they have a lot of really cool gadgets. They have moisture meters that they can stick into the wall to see if there's any moisture there. If a water stain is still active, they go up into the roof and they shine their flashlight on the decking so they can see if there's been a previous leak or if there's a current leak, that kind of thing. So he can only inspect what they can see, but it's worth getting with the inspection. So once you get your inspection back, you go through it, that's an opportunity perhaps to renegotiate. So if things came back on the inspection that you want the seller to fix, you can ask them for a price reduction in lieu of repairs. So in my mind, and it depends on the repair, but do you want the seller fixing the house or do you want money back and you fix it yourself? Which one feels better to you? Because the seller doesn't want the house anymore. And so he might get his brother to fix it or he might fix it himself. So if it's your house, which it is because you're trying to buy it, you might decide to do a price reduction in lieu of repairs. But you can use that inspection report to your advantage, and your agent will know how to do that. So depending on what comes back, sometimes inspections come back perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with the house. Although no house is perfect, your inspector will always find something, but you're basically looking for big issues, structural issues, mold, things like that. So that's what the inspections are for. Somebody on the Facebook page felt like she had gotten screwed on an inspection. So they didn't elaborate on that, but that inspection report will let you know a little bit deeper than what you could see on your own. So once all is said and done, that's basically the main thing to remember. If you want a house on a sunny day, read the contracts and build a team that's best for you. Build a team with people that you trust, people that you can talk to, and people that you know will work for you, because that's our job, is to take care of you in that transaction, to make sure everything goes seamless, to make sure you don't get screwed over. What kind of questions do you guys have? Yes? The advantage to having an agent when you sell your house, a lot of it has to do with pricing and marketing, because when it belongs to you, you always, not always, but there's something called FSBO, which is for sale by owner. We shorten it to FSBO. FSBOs typically think the house is worth more than it actually is. FSBOs typically look at Zillow. Here's how Zillow works. Zillow does their data in concentric circles. So we all live in Athens. You know, you've got those nice houses up on Prince Avenue. Once you go out a little bit, there are houses around there that are not the same. So Zillow doesn't know about Prince Avenue versus Pope Street, or if you're in Oconee, VFW Drive versus Christian Lake, that's back behind that. So Zillow just kind of goes out like that. So typically, if for sale by owner, they just don't have, they think they have the data, but they don't. It's not to say that they can't do that, but 85% of for sale by owners eventually go with an agent. Because they haven't sold a house before. It's just not their job. It's not what they do. Most people enter a real estate transaction basically once every 7 years. The recession made that statistic go out a little bit till it's like 1 in 10, but you're just not doing it often enough. So the other thing to know is that all of us agents, we drink at the same bars, we shop at the same stores. When we go to work, we go to our meetings, sometimes things get sold before they even get posted. In that I might tell my business partner, hey, I'm getting this new listing, it's this, that, and the other, and then she'll say, hey, I have a buyer for that. So sometimes these transactions happen before they're even publicized. And it's not cheating, it's just networking, it's just the nature of the industry. So having a listing agent allows you to have somebody that can advise you on a true price. Here's the list price. How many things actually sell for list price? It's rare. It's rare that something sells for 100% of list price. There's always some built-in negotiating room, but knowing what the market will bear. I have a client right now who thought she could go outside her neighborhood. She has a nice little house, It's over on the east side, but she thought she could go outside her subdivision to pull comparables. Well, what she didn't know, even though she's brilliant, she's a math professor, an appraiser is not going to go outside the neighborhood if they don't have to. If they can find the 6 comparables that they need, they will not go outside the neighborhood. So even though there's a neighborhood right across the street that have bigger houses that are worth more money, the appraiser doesn't care about that. So why should you care about what the appraiser thinks? Well, because your person, your buyer, is probably going to have to go through a lender. All loans require an appraisal. You can't get around that. So there are rules that the appraiser has to follow. Doesn't matter about the house across the street. So having a listing agent can walk you through that process. You want a bag of Doritos, even though they're not waiting, I can't quite get them? Okay. Want to do the wind up? You did sign the waiver, right? Saying if you got a paper cut, buy a Doritos bag? Yes. How about, all right. What other kind of questions do you guys have? 2? Do you have 2 questions? Oh, no questions? You're just for the Doritos? All right. Yes.
What's the youngest I can try and buy a house at? Does it depend on like my credit score or like my past purchase history?
The youngest, that is a good question. Alan, what's it does matter about your credit history. It does matter about your income. What's the youngest you can get a loan? 18?
I think it's 18. I don't think you can't enter a contract until you're 18.
Gotcha, okay. How old are you?
21.
Are you drinking?
Yes.
Okay, so then you're good to go. If you're old enough to drink, you're old enough to get a loan and buy a house. How about that?
Though. Like I haven't even started one. So.
And that's a really good question. If you know you want to buy a house in the future, building your credit over time is the way to go. I mean, and there are lots of websites you can go to. Alan can help us with this, but I'll check my credit score on a regular basis. I go to Quizzle, and it gives you a free credit report. Now, when a lender looks at it, the lender's looking at all 3 reporting houses. So even though TransUnion may say you have a 650, what's another one? Equifax may say you have a 550. Well, why does one report something different than the other? It just depends. So a lender's going to look at all 3. So if you think you might want to do this, meeting with the lender now who cares about you buying a house within the next year, they can walk you through the process. Don't go to these credit people who wipe out your credit, all of that stuff. Don't do that. Find a lender. Alan and other lenders too have a software that they can do. They can pull your credit and say, okay, here's where you are right now. But if you pay off this card down to a certain amount, like they can not manipulate the data, they can look at the data at hand and advise you on how to get that credit score up. Because you're going to need, Alan, at least a 650. What do you need to get a loan? What's the minimum? Like 650?
Sorry, your partner was bothering me. It's 620, 640, 640 typically.
Yeah, so if you have that, you can start working with that. Now, the lower your score is, it's going to affect your interest rate. So if, say your credit is at 650, and you don't have to have a house right now, it might make sense to wait 6 months, build that credit up so you can get a better rate. Because that interest rate over time is thousands and thousands of dollars. So my advice is always wait until, unless it's an emergency you have to buy right now for some reason, a job or a transfer or whatever, get that credit score up as high as you can get it because that affects your rate. And that interest rate over a 30-year note, even if you're going to sell in 10 years, that interest rate makes a huge difference. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
So do you suggest before even meeting with a real estate agent, meeting with a lender?
You can go either way with that. I would prefer you meet with an agent first because that agent is going to have a lender. If you meet with a good agent, they're going to have a lender that they already work with, and they can recommend several lenders to you because you have to shop loans. So you get something called a fee sheet. You get a fee sheet from lender number 1, and then you can shop it with 2 other lenders, and there might be a little, make them work for your business. We're all working for you. We all want to be able to do it because that's how we get paid. So I would find an agent first and then shop your fee sheets with other lenders to get the best rate. I do it with Alan all the time. I work with Alan a lot. I'll bring him a fee sheet from another bank and I'll say, hey, can you beat this? Oftentimes he can. Every now and then he can't. but you shop for a mortgage just like you shop for a house. Now, you can go to a lender first. Some people do. Some people prefer to go to a lender first. Some people already have a working relationship with the lender that they like. Shop them first, and if they tell you, all they're going to do initially is give you a ballpark, yes, you qualify for 200, based on what you're telling me now, and they'll pull your credit, and based on that, they'll give you what's called a pre-qualification letter. So, that was a good question.
What's the typical rate that you guys take in for your fees for selling or for listing, for both sides?
For it, basically in Athens, it averages about 6%. Some agents will do it for less.
Is that for both sides?
It's one, and then the agent split that. It's called the co-broke. So if I'm your listing agent, I come to your house, I tell you how great you are, I tell you what I think about the house, I give you an honest opinion, and then I give you the rate, and then on the listing agreement, I agree to co-broke or to share that commission with whoever brings me a buyer, with the buyer's agent. What's that?
Is that negotiable?
Everything's negotiable, everything. Do you want Doritos?
If I'm a seller, is that fee negotiable? If I'm a seller and I bring the buyer, or you bring the buyer, is that fee negotiable?
You mean
Which I think that's what he was asking. If he was selling his house and you bring the buyer to his house, are you negotiable on that 6%?
Yes, so if I'm your listing agent and I also happen to bring the buyer, remember we talked earlier about working both sides of the transaction. So technically, is that what you're asking? So yes, if an agent brings you the buyer, they will usually give you a reduced rate. And if they don't, you should ask them for that. And this is what this is about. So you know the back office type of stuff. So an agent might tell you, oh, I'm bringing both sides of the deal, but I'm doing twice the work, so I still want the full 6%. No, I mean, yeah, they're doing the same amount. It's not really the same amount of work, but you can lower that commission if they bring both sides of the deal. Ask for a lower rate. When Christina and I do that, we automatically say that in the beginning at the listing appointment. This is what we charge. If we bring both sides of the deal, the commission is lower.
If you were looking to sell in the near future, what's one of the main things that you should do to improve the value of your house? What's your biggest recommendation?
Just making it look good, because we're affected by that. Making sure that it's super, super clean, fresh, neutral paint. Like if you've got I've got a client right now and she's got turquoise. She loves that color and a lot of her rooms are turquoise, and that's great, but buyers, it makes the rooms look small. And if the buyer doesn't like turquoise, buyers ideally want to walk in. You want a buyer to walk into your house and you don't want them looking at your stuff. You don't want them thinking about what things look like. You want them to move themselves in mentally. So if I came to your house, I would be very honest with you and say, you need to paint this, you need to do this. Like I will tell you what buyers are looking for. In fact, we would go to the front door and we would walk through your house as if we were buyers, because a buyer thinks differently than a seller does. So making as neutral and as fresh as possible. And that's pretty economical. Most of us can paint ourselves, just getting it super, super clean. Clutter is a huge issue, like getting things out, because if it has a lot of clutter, I always tell people it's like if you're reading a beautiful book and then there's a misspelled word or a grammar error, it slows you down, right? You lose the beauty of the book. Houses are the same way. You want the buyer to see themselves in your house, not for them to slow down and look at your wedding pictures that you have 47 on the wall kind of thing. So, but again, a good agent will walk you through, and we need to stage it and get it ready. Once you list your house for market, it's not your house anymore. You got to imagine yourself living in a Pottery Barn ad or whatever decorator's magazine or catalog you're into. It is no longer your house. Once you become a seller, it's now a small business, so you got to treat it as such. And it sucks, especially if you have kids, because your agent's going to call you and say, hey, I know I said 24-hour notice, but I have a buyer. Can we show in 8 hours? Well, if you've got, it's hard. Not all of us live in pristine conditions. So being ready for that and getting the house ready. Usually what I recommend is that you have a basket in every room. And when you know you have a showing coming up, dump all that stuff that you know is not supposed to be out, dump all that stuff in a basket and put it to the side. Did that answer your question? Yes. Ask, you want to brag of Doritos?
So what about renovations to the house before you sell it?
Yes, think of it like a prom date. So when you get ready for the prom, you have everything all ready to go. You've got the corsage, you've done your hair, the whole shebang. So you want it as ready and as 100% as you can make it.
So if somebody would want to increase the value of the house and they're considering, let's say, redoing the typical things like bathroom, kitchen or something, is it worth it or not? Or
It depends. It depends on your neighborhood. If you're living in a neighborhood where, and this is where knowing what other things are selling for, if the highest house in your area sold for $200,000 and the things in your area have stainless and granite, but they don't have the third bath, or there's other things that they don't have, there's no point in you doing that. If your neighbors, the other people who are selling, don't have those upgrades, you're not going to get your money back on those upgrades.
so you're saying if, let's say all the houses, the last 5 or 6 or whatever houses in the neighborhood sold for 220, it doesn't matter how nice your house is, how much you upgrade, you're not gonna be able to sell your house for 280?
Pretty much. And it depends on, this is where it gets a little tricky. In town Athens, let's take Normal Town or Five Points, for example. Y'all all know those areas. You can have a little house that is that far away from being a tear down, and then you can have a house across the street that's brand new construction. So once you're in town, it's a little bit different, but keep in mind, you want to be able to appraise for whatever you get for your house. Say you get your 280 that you want. If the appraiser can't justify it, then your buyer can't get the loan and you've lost the deal. And a cash buyer, while cash is beautiful, cash buyers usually don't pay full price. Cash buyers hold on to their cash. They tend to come in a little bit low. Not every time, but it just depends. But before you do upgrades, knowing what is around you and what the market will bear and what it will support, that would be very good for you to know before you invest a lot of money in upgrades. Did I answer your question?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
I have another one if I may.
Yeah, how many bags of Doritos would you like?
This one's free.
Okay.
What's the average time a house is currently on the market in Athens?
That is a great question. If it's not overpriced, it can sell as quickly as a day. Didn't we just do numbers on average price, average days on market?
Yeah, that was a county story.
Well, average days on market in Oconee were what? She just got interviewed with one of the local papers.
It was less than 45 days, depending on the price.
So if something has sold, if it says 45 days, that's a little bit misleading because the loan process takes about 45 days. So if it says that it's 45 days on market, chances are they got their offer in the first week because we can't close it out until we go to closing. But the loan process is going to take about 30 to 45 days, 30 days. So that's the other thing that your agent can do if you're thinking about going to market, knowing before we put an offer on the house, we pull the same data that we would if we're going to list your house because we want to list at the right price, right? We want to get the absolute most money for your house that we possibly can. So we look at comparables in the area. When we're in town Athens, we're a little bit more flexible because we're not stuck in a subdivision. If you're in a subdivision, you're kind of stuck there unless there are no comps, in which case the appraiser goes outside the neighborhood. But if you're in town, if you're in Five Points or Normal Town, it's just a little bit more, the appraisers have more flexibility. So you can have fun with your upgrades, put in the stainless and the tile and do that kind of stuff. If you think you're going to sell, before you do a renovation, I would definitely talk to a realtor just to get those numbers because you don't want to lose money on that. Landscaping is a perfect example. Landscaping hardly ever brings in the money that you think it's going to do. You can spend 10 grand on landscaping and it looks good and you have good curb appeal and your buyer's going to recognize that, but the appraiser doesn't care that you just put, a bunch of perennials out front. So you just want to balance that out. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have the average home price in Athens? Do you have the median?
Not off the top of my head, but if you want to grab a business card, I can email you that. It takes me 2 minutes to run a report. I want to say the median is not that far from the average. Last time I looked for Clark County it was about 187. You think that's funny, 187? Want to share with the class? I've always wanted to say that.
No, I was talking about Oconee County. She
Okay.
was just asking me. The
Got it.
median in Oconee County is 415,000.
415.
Yeah.
She was like, oh, this is good gracious.
What's your question?
If I own a home Can a realtor help me with renting it, or should I try and do that on my own? Are there pluses?
You almost need a realtor more, I think, for rentals, because property management, it's just a whole different ball of wax. I think there's more liability, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think there's more liability with property management, because now you're dealing with tenant-landlord rules. So I would definitely, even if you just pay the property manager to get the lease in there initially, reading that lease and making sure those people are tied down and covering all your bases, things like, are you going to charge them if they lose their key and you have to go get them in? Like, there's a lot of things. It's a completely different ball of wax with property management. So I would definitely consult with, even if you just pay a consulting fee and let them find your tenant, maybe you can manage it yourself, but I think it's worth what they do. If you're doing property management on your own and they clog the toilet, it's, on a Saturday night, who are they going to call? They're going to call you. And unless you enjoy that kind of thing, it's let the other people do their job. So, good question. You want a bag of Doritos?
No, but I have a backup. And if I'm looking for a rental in the area, an agent can help me do that, or do I have to go to one of these places?
An agent can definitely help you do that. Rentals are kind of a different breed, because rentals, some people will hire an agent to rent their place out, but a lot of people put their own stuff on Craigslist, that sort of thing. But again, you want to be careful. There's a lot of fraud on Craigslist. One of my listings once, somebody had taken the pictures from my listing, which anybody can download, treated it as a rental on Craigslist. And what they do is they collect a deposit from you, and the house is for sale. It was never for rent. They don't even have keys. But my seller saw her house on Craigslist and called me about it, because she was curious why I was trying to rent her house out on Craigslist. But I wasn't. They had stolen the pictures. So again, having an agent, somebody who does it on a regular basis, I think is well worth your time. And you don't pay for that. The homeowner pays for that. So if you use an agent for rental, it's free. Why would you not take advantage of that?
Do you guys only get paid if the person, let's say I'm looking to buy a house, do you only get paid if I actually find a house and buy it? What if I start looking with you and we don't find one that I like? What happens?
Then nothing. I mean, we just keep looking until you find something. I mean, the agents don't get paid until a transaction closes.
But is there a timely contract, or are you like on a contract with me for a month to find a house, or is this an?
It depends. I mean, I've got people. I had one client who took a year to find the house. It just depends. I have another client I've been working with for 2 years because she's struggling with her credit. So it just depends. I'm in it for the long haul. So you stay in touch with people. Eventually, people will buy stuff. Sometimes people don't. But in answer to your question, again, it goes back to having somebody that you trust and who is furthering your goals. So if you don't buy something in the first couple of months, you'll buy something eventually. And you know what? If you don't buy anything and I treated you well, when your friend decides they need an agent, you might refer me to her.
But there's no obligation, there's no contractual obligation to stay with that real estate agent.
Yes and no. There's a form. Remember, we did contracts. There's a form called a buyer's brokerage. If you sign that buyer's brokerage, you are obligated to stay with that agent for whatever time frame is in that contract.
Okay, so there's a time frame in it.
Unless you terminate that contract.
Yes, you can terminate a buyer's brokerage by writing a letter, put it in writing, yo bitch, you suck, I don't want to work with you anymore. Something like that, exactly. I'm sorry, I forgot we were a live feed. But yeah, now, with a listing agreement, that's a completely different ballgame. It is very difficult to get out of a listing agreement. So, for example, if you're going to list your house, maybe you don't want to sign up for a year. Maybe you want to make it a 3 to 6 month contract, but a listing agreement is slightly different, which is why you have to read these contracts. They're boring, they're no fun, but you need to read them and ask questions. Ask questions until you're absolutely sure. You're welcome. Those are good questions. Other questions? Other Doritos? Alan?
One question I get often, especially for first-time home buyers, is are they responsible to pay the real estate agent's commission as a buyer? Obviously, I explained that it's built into the seller price, but I get that question.
Yes. No. When you have a listing agreement, so the selling agent or the listing agent has a listing agreement with the seller. In that listing agreement, the seller agrees to pay a commission. that commission within the listing agreement, everybody agrees that the listing agent will share that commission with the buyer's agent. Now, if the buyer, in a rare example, I've never known this to happen, but again, these are real contracts. You can go to court over these things. You can be sued over them. So if you go in to a contract and you've done, the agent has done everything they were supposed to do, and you back out of a deal at the last minute, the day before closing, as a buyer, you have opened yourself up to a potential lawsuit. The broker could sue you for commission. So it does happen. The beautiful thing about Athens, even if we all work together, like all the agents here, it's not like this in the Atlanta market, it's just different up there, but we all drink at the same bars, we all shop at the same grocery store. We're gonna run into each other eventually. It forces us to be nicer to one another. So no one in my group, I've never known an agent to sue a buyer. It does happen, it could happen, but provided you play by the rules and you adhere to the contracts, then you're good to go. Did I answer your question? So buyers don't pay the commission, the listing agents do. The sellers do. I feel like I'm on Jeopardy now, go ahead.
But it's not really the buyers suing the agent, it's the buyer suing the seller, because it's the seller who is not, 9 times out of 10, it's the seller who is not following through with the contract.
This is true.
So, depending on how the contract is written. So still, it's not the buyer suing anybody, unless the buyer really, really wants a house and the seller says, yeah, guess what, I don't want to sell to you.
And that has happened and I love case studies. If in the event, it's very rare that happens, but when it does, provided you play by the contract, then none of these things happen. I've never known anybody to sue a buyer. I'm sure it's happened somewhere, but buyers are not on the hook for that. That's what the contracts are for. Any other questions? Is that it? So, in conclusion, ask questions. First of all, the best thing that you can do to not get screwed in real estate is to build a team of people that are knowledgeable and competent and that you trust. You could be with somebody who's perfectly competent, but you're not comfortable with them. You're not comfortable telling them that you need a support beam in your bedroom that will hold 800 pounds, or whatever it is. If you want to drink coffee naked off your deck, this is your house. This is you shopping. You need that person to be knowledgeable, but you also need them to be somebody that you connect with. It's a very, very personal transaction. That agent can then hook you up with a lender, because that lender is going to go through your bank statements. They're going to see what you spend your money on. It can get a little sticky, so you want to build a team of people that are working for you and that you trust. If you do that, then none of this other stuff matters. Everything else will be copacetic. It will work out fine. You can have all the Doritos you can possibly consume, but building that team initially for yourself is absolutely the best thing that you can do. And ask questions. Do not be afraid to ask. There's no such thing as a stupid question. I get crazy stuff all the time in text. People will go, oh, what about this? But you want that person who communicates with you. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.